Hello everyone. Today, as previously we left the topic at liberal versus literal approach. I'm sorry, let me once again check if the recording has started. Yes. Okay. We know that there are various approaches to constitutional and approaches have been taken. Today we are going to discuss on whether to take the liberal or the literal approach and which approach did our own Supreme Court has taken regarding to it. So again the source is the same, that is the Indian Constitutional Law by MP Jain. It's the 8th edition. And let's start with the topic now. Now literal approach means a mechanical, a very narrow interpretation of our constitution. This approach is also known as positivist approach or an Austinian approach. Here the judgments of the court constitute a mere exegesis of the fundamental text. So the court just take on what the fundamental text is and interpret it accordingly or literally. But another approach is an liberal approach, which is also called as law creative interpretation. Here constitution is interpreted liberally than an ordinary statute. Interpretation of it affects the entirety of the government functioning is well understood while taking this approach. Even the policy making, even constitutional process of the country may be affected by it. So keeping in mind the entire governmental functioning, the constitutional process, policy making, everything may be affected and how the judgment is made. Everything is taken into account in a liberal approach. So there is need for liberal approach to interpretation of the constitution or not. Let's discuss upon it. Now one thing has to be remembered, that constitution is not an ephemeral legal document. Instead, it sets out principles for an expounding future. And this has been well noted by Chief Justice Marshall in the case McCulloch versus Maryland. Let me spell out the spelling. MCCULLOCH versus Maryland. Chief Justice Marshall said this. Another thing has to be noted that the liberal approach will help to meet nearly all the newly emerging challenges and not get fossilized. If we always take what literally the constitution meant, so we cannot give a new life to various provisions of it. It will eventually become a fossil. And also has to be taken that how can we interpret our fundamental rights if we do not take the liberal approach with it. Even as we will discuss later, that our court has taken liberal approach, especially in consideration with fundamental rights. A side note has to be taken here that Charles Evans Hughes, let me spell out this. Charles Evans is EVANS and Hughes is HUGHES. The liberal approach has been taken in USA, as noted by Charles. He says that we are under the constitution, but the constitution is what the judges say it is. So we can say or we can judge in USA how much the liberal approach has taken over. That such an statement was made by Charles. Even Edward McWhiney is MCWHINNEY. McWhiney says the text of the constitutional instruments seem merely to be the servants of ultimately judicial policies only. So constitutional instruments are just servants of judicial policies. Both the statement tell us the extent of liberal approach in USA, though in India such an approach is taken but not to that extent. Now let's see the examples of both the approaches in India. When it comes to literal interpretation, the crowning example of it is the Gopalan case, which actually denuded Article 21 of much of its efficacy and made personal liberty a matter of legislative discretion. Another example would be the habeas corpus case during the emergency era of 1975. The liberal approach in India, I think the best example would be the Goodyear case or the Pathuma case. in which Supreme Court has emphasized that the judicial approach to the Constitution should be dynamic rather than static, pragmatic and not pedantic, elastic rather than rigid. The high watermark of liberal approach in India is the Keshavananda Bharti case. Let's see the impact of liberal approach. Now we have understood that traditionally India's Supreme Court might have taken literal approach, but now the changing circumstances, liberal approach has been taken. Two examples we have seen. Now let's see what is the impact of this approach. First of all, the Supreme Court gave the expanding horizon of Article 12 to inject respect for human rights and social consciousness in India's corporate structure. Second point, the broad interpretation of fundamental rights has been taken place because of it, like Article 14, unreasonable laws or actions infringes Article 14 was interpreted due to this approach. In the Menka Gandhi case, we can see a new vigor in the moribund of Article 22 was in 22 or 21, sorry, Article 21 was there. I'm very sorry, it's Article 21. Fundamental rights need not be expressly stated and be implied, like freedom of press. All of these are actually the impact of liberal approach, because freedom of press was not anywhere written. It was by Supreme Court interpreted in the Article 19. Another thing which is remarkable is that fundamental rights and DPSP are interpreted as supplementary of each other. It is said by the Supreme Court that Part 3 be read with DPSP and preamble. The effect is as such that government has given depth to fundamental rights using DPSPs and also made many DPSPs enforceable which are otherwise unenforceable. The high watermarks we already had discussed in the Keshavananda case, where the doctrine of basic features was also done. Has any other country taken liberal approach? We already discussed about USA, the two statements of Charles and McViney. Australia is also an example where freedom of political discussion was interpreted as basic structure part of their constitution, though otherwise they do not had any such thing before. The freedom of political discussion was interpreted. The case was Nationwide News Party Limited versus Wills case. So that is our discussion for today. Is next time we will see what are the various norms for constitutional interpretation, what else is taken into consideration while we interpret the constitution. Thank you. We'll meet you again.